Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about this special and very unusual meeting that was hosted by President Donald Trump in the White House. A bunch of leaders, about 7 European leaders, and Vladimir Zelensky were there, and they were discussing essentially the future of Europe, the future of the Russia-Ukraine war, and basically a follow-up to the US-Russia summit, which was held on Friday in Alaska. So I'm going to try and identify some of the core implications of that meeting, what stood out for me, and whether I'm optimistic about this deal going forward or not. But before that, please, if you have not already subscribed to the channel, subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your socio-political network, and also consider becoming a member of Khanversations. So the first thing that I want to basically reflect on is that it's indeed quite remarkable that on Friday, Donald Trump gets to meet with Putin, and I've done a whole show on that. I think it was a huge victory for Putin. It was not a loss for Donald Trump, but there were lots of things there which could have led to losses for Europe. Clearly, Ukraine will have to give up a lot of territory in pursuit of peace. That was what came out of the Alaska summit. But the speed with which Donald Trump was able to literally summon these European leaders. In fact, he spoke with Zelensky, invited Zelensky, and Zelensky basically came with a posse to protect him. Last time he was here, he was humiliated, isolated, he was alone. But this time he came with the entire weight of the European Union and United Kingdom behind him. So he brought with him several leaders. The Prime Minister of Great Britain was there, the Chancellor of Germany, the President of France, the Giorgia Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy was there, the President of Finland was there, and of course the leaders of NATO and European Union. So it was really the high power meeting of the West. In fact, the entire G7 was there, minus Canada and Japan. And so it was a very important meeting, and it kind of elevated Donald Trump to the stature of the world leader that the rest of the world does not recognize. But the fact that he's able to summon all of these people to the White House to discuss the future of Europe is something that even Joe Biden could not do during his reign. So this was a big deal. I think this day was an important day for Donald Trump. He must have looked very good to MAGA, and he must have looked very good to the rest of the world, even though they hate him now. Practically every country in the world hates the United States and Donald Trump. But nevertheless, this was a big moment for him. So what has really come out of this? So there seems to be a consensus now on two things, at least in the West. One, that a lot of land will have to be conceded to Putin in order to win a peace, a ceasefire, and a solution. And the second thing that everyone seems to be agree upon, including the United States, is that there will be some kind of security guarantees given to a smaller Ukraine in size. So some kind of guarantee that it will have the capacity and the support in case Russia decides to attack it again in the near future, 5 years down the line. So apparently all the Western countries, US and the European powers which were there, seem to have agreed on these two issues, even though Macron seemed very reluctant to reward Putin with territory, but without giving up territory, I guess there will be no end to this war. But there was another sort of vague agreement, which is about security guarantees, which is whether it will be NATO or not. So they agree that perhaps they'll have to concede land to get peace. Number two, that they will have to ensure that Ukraine has some kind of security guarantees. And the United States, Trump has made it clear that the US will participate. But the nature of US participation in this is not very clear. And there are signals that it will not be through troops. US is not going to put its troops in Ukraine in harm's way. It will have to be Europeans, and they will have to take a lead in this. US may provide support, intelligence, even weapons, etc. But the third part is it going to be a NATO commitment? And the answer seems to be no. It will be NATO-like. Now, that is the question. What is NATO-like? Does it have an Article 5 commitment or not? If Russia were to attack Ukraine in 2030, will it be treated as an attack on the United States, as an attack on Canada, as an attack on France, Britain, on Poland, on Bulgaria? Or is it going to be a coalition of willing? So there will be some European countries who will take Russia's attack on Ukraine as an attack on themselves, while there might be other countries like Serbia, which will say, well, we are not Ukraine. And it depends on who is the American president, I guess, and how much money he has taken from which lobby. And that America's position will then be decided whether America will consider it as an attack on America or not. So this whole idea of NATO light, if I was Zelensky, I would not accept it. But he's not going to get anything better than that, at least from Donald Trump. Okay, he may have received promises from Joe Biden. And I think it's time leaders in the world recognize that do not take American president's promises. Joe Biden promised to restore the JCPOA and never did it. Joe Biden promised eternal support for Ukraine till whatever it takes, till however long it takes. No, he's gone. So I think countries in the world must accept US help in the short term and recognize that long term, there's always a question mark to US commitment, the way US politics are going, unless, of course, there's a treaty and the US has signed it and been ratified by the Senate, then perhaps you can bet on it. Even then, I'm sure US presidents, if they do not want to fulfill a commitment, they can always find an excuse not to. So that is the third issue, is what kind of securities will be guaranteed. Going forward, they have agreed that there will be a bilateral between Putin and Zelensky where they will directly negotiate the land swap. I think Donald Trump does not want to be responsible for delineating what Ukraine will have to give up, and so he's keeping himself out. But the third meeting or the subsequent meeting, or the most important meeting, where the announcement of ceasefire and peace will be made. Obviously, Donald Trump wants to be there to take the full credit, so there will be a trilateral subsequently. So there will be a bilateral without Europe and the US, and then there will be a trilateral with the US. And even the Europeans were saying that it's important to have that trilateral to close the deal if there are gaps after Zelensky and Putin meeting. But I kind of agree with Putin that the Europeans will somehow pressure Zelensky into making an offer that Putin cannot accept in terms of territory. And maybe they'll say, okay, you can keep Crimea, but you have to get out of the Donbas region. I'm not very sure whether Putin is going to accept that. The war is continuing. One thing that the Europeans and the Ukrainians did not get is an immediate ceasefire. So while they are talking, they will be fighting. And so far, Russia seems to be having a strategic and tactical advantage, and it is trying to press its advantage and convert that into more land. But clearly, Putin wants to get more land through negotiations rather than war. And so he's asking for about 30% more land in the two provinces that he really cares about. And he wants to agree on Kherson and Zaporozhye. He wants to agree on the line of actual control. There are some other discussions that took place, and I found that a bit, I don't know, they seem to be like in the air. I'll just quickly summarize that for you. And then I will share my main points on this discussion. So one of the things that I noticed is there's a lot of discussion about weapons. So America is going to sell Europe $90 billion worth of weapons, which will then be transferred to Ukraine. Now, it's not very clear, will this happen during the war right now, or will it happen as guarantees after the ceasefire? But clearly, the US is not committing financial support to this. But the US is committing to buying a truckload of Ukrainian drones. And I guess given the fact that Ukraine has a long history of corruption and they know how to do corrupt things, probably the prices of those drones will be much, much higher than they really are. And that way, indirectly, Trump will get to transfer American taxpayer money to Ukrainians pretending to sell things. I think that is a shady side of it. I hope that American reporters keep a close eye on that deal. Then there's also this discussion of prisoner swap. And there was much made about Melania Trump's letter to Zelensky's wife, about children. And so there is going to be some emphasis on swapping of children and prisoners of war. But nevertheless, we will see what happens. And I have a feeling that if Trump takes his hand off the negotiations and allows the European leaders to step in, then the Europeans think that they are smarter than Americans. They think Americans are stupid. They also think that Donald Trump in particular is an idiot. And so they are going to try to basically con Putin into disagreeing, ceasefire, dragging the US into the war again. And so they want to make a Biden out of Trump. I think that's the best deal that the Europeans are thinking, and they are going to try their best to undermine it. So I would recommend the US intelligence to keep a real close eye on what discussions the Europeans have with Zelensky before the bilateral between Zelensky and Putin. And I would recommend that even if Donald Trump does not go there and it's not called a trilateral, I think Steve Witkoff should at least Steve Witkoff, if not Steve Witkoff and J.D. Vance, attend that meeting when Zelensky meets Putin. So these are a few of my takes. I think it was a good day for diplomacy for Donald Trump. He looked as if he was in charge of the world. And one other point that I want to make is that India's foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar, keeps harping on the fact that this is a multipolar world and there are a bunch of powers out there. You know, India has become so irrelevant, it is unbelievable. There was no sign of India. India was not considered important at all to be at this discussion. Neither was Japan. This is the Europeans deciding not just the future of Europe and Eurasia, but they are also going to determine to a great extent what happens going forward in the richest part of the world at the moment, which is the West. So that's another thing to observe, that when European issues are decided, Asian powers, India, China, Japan, have no input. And when there are Asian issues at stake, the West is all over it. And that is because it's not a multipolar world. Asian powers are still not able to determine their own future themselves. Even when India was fighting with Pakistan, the Indian Prime Minister and Indian Foreign Minister and the Indian National Security Advisor were talking to Americans. They were not talking to the Chinese or the Japanese. So this is another observation that I want to make, that when issues of Europe are decided, Asians have no say. And when Asian issues are decided, Europeans are all over it. Take the case of Taiwan, for example. Anyway, thank you for watching Khanversations. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your socio-political network. Until next time, I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan. Take care.